Hello, welcome to One Life Explore Edition. This is Sarah.
And this is Matt.
And at One Life, it is so important to us to be a place where people can discuss important topics in a safe way and have a place where you can dialogue and ask hard questions. And that's exactly what One Life Explore Edition is designed to do.
Yeah, and if you're watching live right now, that's cool. You can use the chat feature where you're watching right now and let us know any questions that pop up. That's what the whole idea of this. We want this to be a dialogue, not a monologue. We want to see your questions, read them, and have some space to respond to them. If you're watching later, use the comment section of wherever you're watching right now. We want to take those questions as well and utilize our Q&As as they continue to come up each episode as well. But today, we are going to continue on to a new topic. And last week, we talked about how people can be really great. I mean, seriously, there's some great things about people. Like, one of my favorite things is when you go to a kid's t-ball game, Matt. Seriously, it's the best thing. Even if you're having a bad day, watching kids try to swing and either miss or like they hit the ball and they don't know which way to go, they run the wrong way, or then they hit it and the kids in the outfield all run to the ball at the same time. It's the sweetest, like most innocent thing, and it just makes you realize that people are kind of okay sometimes. What about you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, let's just be honest. People invented donuts.
I do like donuts.
And so one of the things that my family is looking forward to getting back to someday is going to a local donut shop, hanging out, because there's just an atmosphere where you rarely see somebody upset eating a donut. It's just a nice place to be. And so we're looking forward to that again, just being around those atmospheres where everybody's just kind of joyful and doing something they love and tasting delicious donuts.
What's your favorite donut?
Great. I love chocolate Long Johns. If I had a go-to donut that I'm never going to be upset with, that's the one.
That's the one you go to? Well, that's awesome. But we also know that there's some frustrating and maybe some annoying things that people do as well. Honestly, one of my things that drives me the most crazy is when I go up to a four-way stop and someone thinks it's their turn and it's not. I mean, like, who taught people how to do this? You go up to a four-way stop, everyone takes a turn, and if we all just work together, it works fine. Or even worse is if someone's up there and you kind of stop at the same time, you're like, I'm not sure who's gonna go, but they wave you on real aggressively. Like, why? Like, why do you have to do that? That drives me crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously that you have some issues
I do have some
while
issues.
driving, but that's okay. Yeah. I get it. I've been there. And obviously, you know, that's a annoying example. There's tons of those that we've all experienced, but right now what we're experiencing in our country, in our culture, is when the reality that racism still exists in real ways, even with all of the progress that we've seemingly made in our culture, and everyone is watching videos of a young black man being held down and obviously dying at the hands of a white police officer. And we're wrestling with that and the injustice of that, and that along with all the other injustices that go on in our culture. And you look at all the beautiful things that we're capable of, and it's like, why do these things still happen? What is wrong, right? There is something wrong, because it should not be this way. And so the topic we get in tonight, it's a little heavy, just to be honest, but we need to talk about these things. We need to get these topics out there and talk about why we see these things and why they are wrong, because they are. And we believe that the Bible has an answer for that. And so we're going to start this week out, this episode, like we normally do, with a short film that gets into the question of what is wrong. And then we're going to hear from our lead pastor, Brett Nicholson.
Human beings are amazing. We carry inside our heads the single most complex organ in the known universe. That weird-looking 3-pound mass contains as many interconnections as there are stars in the Milky Way galaxy. As a result, our accomplishments can be jaw-dropping, from gymnastics to the Sistine Chapel, Apollo 11, medical technology, robotics, people relating and laughing, doing math. Then there's the invention of chips and salsa. When we are on, we are on. It's really quite remarkable. We fill the world with love, art, innovation, kindness, caring laughter, beauty, and cuteness. But that's not the whole story. With all that's right, something's wrong. We know it. We live with it every day. We see it when we look out the window. We see it when we look in the mirror. We experience it at work and in our homes. If we can stand to look at the news, we see the extreme expressions of it.
Wildfire. Response to the shooting.
Call it corruption. Call it a failure to live up to an ideal. Call it, in some cases, evil. Whatever you call it, there's a stain on life. There's a stain on us. If we took inventory of all the good things people bring to life, it would be an extraordinary list. At the same time, if we were gut-level honest and listed off all the bad things people brought to life, the two lists might end up being very close to the same length. This corruption runs from subtle to monumental. We all experience those little injustices and selfish acts committed by our neighbors, co-workers, even spouses and friends, and, transparency time, ourselves. We slight one another or intentionally ignore each other. We prefer ourselves over one another. We dish out insults. We claim to be tolerant until we discover someone actually sees the world differently from us. We're inconsiderate. We can't believe how selfish or annoying others can be. We explode in anger or shrink back and silently fume, blown away and frustrated by people's obviously wrong behavior. We also know there are deeper, darker sins that run through our society, evil hidden behind smiles and normal lives. Studies by the Crimes Against Children Research Center shows that 1 in 5 girls and 1 in 20 boys is a victim of child sexual abuse. According to a National Institute of Justice report, 3 out of 4 adolescents who have been sexually assaulted were victimized by someone they knew well. In other words, someone they thought they could trust. Then there's the not-so-subtle stuff that makes it to the news. Every day, reports pour in about robberies, murders, shootings, sex trafficking, gang violence, greed, exploitation, modern slavery, and child neglect. Modern slavery is a $150 billion per year industry. International Justice Mission estimated that roughly 40.3 million individuals are currently caught in the slave trade. They also report that 1 in 4 victims of modern slavery is a child. And what makes these facts even more disturbing is while we blame the slave traders themselves, the industry wouldn't exist if it didn't have customers. In other words, all over the world, people are enslaving other people, and very commonly, those slaves are children. On average, around the world, 68,000 deaths a year occurred in natural disasters. In the year 2016 alone, 385,000 deaths occurred due to murder. Something's wrong. The world is broken. We are broken. Then there's the corruption that has made the history books. We're all familiar with the Nazi genocide, but we should never forget the lesser-known evils which killed millions within one single century. The killing fields of Cambodia, with over 1 million murders. Stalin's man-made famine, estimated to have killed as many as 12 million people, and that's not counting the massive numbers he condemned to the gulags. Or there's China's Cultural Revolution, thought to be responsible for 3 million deaths, which came after Chairman Mao's Great Leap Forward, which is thought to have caused 45 million unnecessary deaths, including 2.5 million who were summarily killed or tortured. The list has gone on enough. From personal annoyances to state-sponsored genocide, it's undeniable that something courses through our veins that's poisonous. Our worldview is formed by our answer to the question, what is wrong? Is it a lack of education or opportunity? Is it a reversion to our evolved animal and savage selves? The Christ-centered worldview includes a straightforward story that has a lot of explanatory power. God created the world good. He entrusts it to mankind as stewards. Man chooses to reject God's way of doing things. Poison is injected into the entire system. As a result, all of us, while still created in God's image and therefore valuable and capable of great things, also carry a kind of virus whose effects are sometimes easy to see and other times, well, disguised. But always, in all of us. The Christ-centered worldview is summed up well by a story from the early 20th century. When a newspaper posed the question, "What's wrong with the world?" the Catholic thinker G.K. Chesterton reputedly wrote a brief letter in response. "Dear Sirs, I am. Sincerely yours, G.K. Chesterton."
That last quote by G.K. Chesterton, in my opinion, is the best summary of the Christ-centered worldview's answer to the question, what's wrong with the world, that I know there is. That whole idea is what's wrong with the world is right in here. What's wrong out there is wrong in here. That's why things go wrong, because human beings have a corruption inside of them. And I'm pointing at myself, I'm pointing at anyone that's watching, I'm pointing at all of us. If you're human, there's a corruption inside of you that adds up to that problem. Now, we've been going through a grid over the last several weeks, if you're just joining us, and we're just kind of giving everybody a way to explore. How to explore not only the Christian faith, but any faith, and even non-faiths. And we said you ought to go about it with worldview questions. Worldview questions are the most important and meaningful questions of life, like what's wrong with the world, or where did everything come from? And then you take the answers that each of the worldviews give. If it's the Christian faith or Islam or atheism or whatever else, and they all give answers, they all give reasons why they have those answers, and then finally there's implications from those answers that translate into actions ultimately. Well, this question of what's wrong with the world, a lot of people think that the Christ-centered worldview is a little bit too grim. This whole idea that everybody's corrupt. I've seen in countless movies, the line gets brought up oftentimes, I think people are basically good. I think people are basically good. Well, if you rightly understand what the Christ-centered view is saying, you may not view it quite as negative. But keep in mind, it was G.K. Chesterton also said that the view, the Christian doctrine of original sin is the only Christian doctrine with empirical proof. So it's something we need to think about. Look at it this way. We all carry around a video camera in our pockets. It's called a smartphone. And a new phenomenon has been happening over the last several years that we're seeing bad human behavior recorded for us and posted on the internet. Right? I mean, we've seen videos of, it's Black Friday and there's people outside a department store and they're fighting one another so they can get to a certain toy that's on sale. We see that kind of stuff. And at the same time, we've seen actual real life murder, racially motivated murder through what people are posting. Now, here's what's scary about that, is that's not going up because there's video phones. It's going up because it's always been there. It's just now we have a way to record it. And that is further evidence, as if the film didn't give you enough, that this corruption is inside of us, because the more eyes we place on human behavior, the more evil we tend to see. I've been a pastor for a really, really long time. And the first 15 or so years, I did a lot of counseling. I don't do as much as I used to, but I did a lot of counseling. And one of the things I noticed over time, it just I started picking up on it, was that a lot of people that came in and told me their life story related that they had experienced sexual abuse as children. And I noticed it so much as a trend that I don't fear exaggerating when I would say that a full 40 to 50% of the people that came into my office and told me their life story had that experience. Now, I also know that I had an experience. And now, the reason I bring that up is because, we argue in our culture about, sexual ethics all the time. But what we don't argue about is that one. We all rank that as absolutely evil, absolutely inexcusable. This is just a terrible, terrible evil. Yet you may have heard the saying, if you see one roach in your house, it represents 100 others. The more I thought about that, I thought, wait a minute. If this many people, just in my own practice as a pastor, are relating this, and in my own life are relating this, how much does this really go on? Now, you saw a glimpse of that in the film. What does that say about us? That says that things that we mark out as absolutely evil are practiced a whole lot more than we're willing to admit. You see, the reason we say things like, I believe people are basically good, is because we don't see what people do. We're seeing it more on video now, and what's it showing us? People are a little more evil than we've given them credit for. And when you see those statistics in the film or my own life experience, you realize that evil goes on a whole lot more than we are willing to admit. Now that brings us to what the Christian doctrine is. It's called original sin. It's said in some circles it's called total depravity. There's nuances that Christian different traditions bring, but we all agree on one thing, is that corruption is inside of all of us. Now what we need to understand about total depravity or original sin, what it does not mean, it doesn't mean that every single human being is as evil as they can be all the time in every way. That's not true to our experience, and that's not what it's saying. What it is saying is that every human being, though created in the image of God, though amazing in so many ways, because God has granted that to them, every part of them has a corruption in it. In fact, we had a little bit of a cringe factor. We made these films before the coronavirus hit the world. And we use a virus as a metaphor and illustration in the film. At first we kind of cringed over it, but the more I think about it, it's a very apt illustration. It's like we all know something is going on inside our world that we can't see. We don't always see its effects. We rarely do, but we know they're there. And we know it's affecting everything in one form or the other. It's the same way with us. You know, I said last week that because the Nazis and Hitler provide our society kind of a baseline of evil, I've studied Hitler's life quite a bit, actually. And what's interesting about him is he was known to the people around him as being good with kids. When a kid would walk in the room, a little kid would walk in the room, he'd get them to laugh, he'd get them to smile, put them on his lap. He was very good with children. And there was no record that it was pedophilia or any of that kind of thing. That's what it means by no person is as evil as they can be all the time in every way. But we would all say, just because he was good with children doesn't mean he wasn't corrupt. But the problem is that it's all inside every one of us. Now next week, we are going to talk about the cure. From a Christ-centered worldview, what's the cure? But for now, we need to think about something. That's the Christ-centered worldview. People are created in the image of God. Therefore, they have dignity, they have worth, there's goodness that comes through them. But on the other hand, people have this corruption. And I've been making the argument the entire time that one of the main reasons that I believe the Christ-centered message, and honestly, I think you should too, is because its view of life corresponds to life as we experience it. And I think this whole thing of total depravity, original sin, corresponds to our experience. Not only what we see in the news, but what we see in the mirror. And that's something to think about. Now, I always like to give kind of the other extreme, naturalism. Naturalism is on the rise. It's in university campuses. It's become more popular on YouTube and everything else. And a representative of naturalism is Richard Dawkins, best-selling author and everything. And he said this, just listen to his explanation of evil and the universe and see how they contrast with one another. He said, the universe we observe has precisely the properties we should expect if there is at bottom no design, no purpose, no evil, no good, nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. Now I want to ask you something. Does that really correspond to life as we experience it? Do we really believe that ultimately there's no good, there's no evil, there's no purpose, there's nothing? Well, we don't live that way, and we certainly don't think that way. And if we think we do, all we have to do is have someone steal something from us or witness an injustice on our smartphones. And we change our mind. All of a sudden, evil exists. All of that is something to consider and think about.
You know, we know that a lot of the topics that you even heard today in the film and here talked about from Brett, they're heavy. There's some things that take some processing, some time, and ideally that's what we want. We want to give you a space to do that. So thank you for your questions if you've asked them here already. We want to continue taking those and just responding to them in hopefully just a unique way that allows you to continue exploring.
Yeah, definitely. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take your comments, your questions. We're going to move straight to our live Q&A on Facebook. And guys, we just want to continue the discussion there. If you're watching this later on YouTube, please continue to comment, continue to discuss, and maybe even give us some feedback on what you're learning from these things, what you wish we would cover. You can even give us some thoughts on different topics that you'd like us to do one-off Explore editions about. That would be awesome. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for your questions, and let's just continue to get better at discussing these things together, and we'll see you next time.